Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Fiber Strike 95 here. Happy Sunday, everyone. We're back with our 50 States and 50 Streams series here on Twitch. Today we're doing our 47th State of the Union. That's right, we're about only a couple more states left to go on this trip. We're in the land of enchantment, New Mexico. Despite being one of the newer U.S. states, I actually think some of the most historic areas of this continent actually were here in New Mexico. It's actually far more historic and far more interesting than people ever give it any credit for. And I say it's one of our nation's most underrated states. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat. We have all the lurkers and moderators. Good to have you guys here. So I hope you guys having a great weekend so far. I got back from the Louisville State football game last night. It was a great game, definitely very intense. But in the end, Lou City drew against Tulsa. So would have loved to have 3 points in that game. But oh well. So, if you guys want to know our flight plan today, here in our day in New Mexico, so we'll start here at La Cruces Regional Airport in La Cruces, New Mexico, home of New Mexico State University, the Cowboys. So we'll start downtown La Cruces, then we're going to enter the university. Then from there, we're going to head northeast, and we're going to fly through White Sands National Park. Now, we'll get back to that national park at the end of our national park series, since it's one of our newest parks. But we're going to fly up through the San Andreas National Wildlife Refuge and make our way right to Sierra Blanca Regional in Rudicio, very well-known village area. From there, we'll head up northwest to our second leg, and our second stop here in Albuquerque, the largest city in New Mexico, here in Albuquerque. Then for our final leg, we're going to go up from Albuquerque. We'll make our way over to the capital city of New Mexico at Santa Fe. Then we're going to visit one of the most historic cities in New Mexico. We'll be heading to Owls. But we'll fly over some of the beautiful New Mexico scenery to Taos, New Mexico. So that is where we're going to today. But we're going to fly to some beautiful scenery, and we're going to see some gorgeous stuff here. So the plane we'll be taking is the Diamond DA62. We're going to be using this again, but I feel like this would be a good time to take the Diamond. I haven't flown this in a while, so I think this would be a pretty neat plane to take in the air for today's trip. So she should be pretty easy to get up and going. It's a Diamond. Diamond planes are always known for how easy it is. It should be pretty easy to get up and going. They're just easy to get turned on and turn off. So we're at La Cruces Regional Airport for today. This airport is the main commercial airport of La Cruces, New Mexico, New Mexico's second biggest city. It's actually mainly used by GA, but it's also used by the U.S. government, the New Mexico State University, private charters, and local civil air patrol schools. It has had some historical airline service, but nowadays it's served by Advanced Air to Albuquerque, main airline service. But in the past, it used to do other airline services with various different airlines historically in the past. But neat little airport. In our city today, we'll be exploring La Cruces, New Mexico, the second most populous city in New Mexico. La Cruces is New Mexico's second most populous city with 1,100 1,000 people. Its metro is about 213,000 people, but La Cruces is most well known for being the economic and geographic center of the Mesilla Valley, the agricultural region on the floodplain of the Rio Grande River. It's home to New Mexico State University, only land-grant university in New Mexico. And of course, it is also not nearby is the White Sands Missile Range, and they are the main employer of the city. And Spaceport America actually operates 55 miles north of La Cruces, which does several cruise suborbital flights, as well as the HQ for Virgin Galactic, the world's first company to offer suborbital space flights. But yeah, La Cruces is a pretty new city, founded in 1849. It's also pretty new. 1849 is when the city first founded. So definitely a pretty cool city with some really cool stuff to do here in La Cruces. Let's see. So our first leg of the day, I'm gonna be flying. We're gonna go to, I believe, 12,500. We're gonna fly into 8,000 feet, and then for the other leg, we're gonna go through. Then we're gonna go all the way up to. It says around 12,500 feet. Welcome to New Mexico. Beautiful day in New Mexico. It's a gorgeous state. So once we're going to be flying over the cruises, we're going to talk about New Mexico here for a bit. Because there's actually a ton to talk about this underrated U.S. state. And trust me, it is actually one of the most underrated U.S. states in the country. I'm not kidding. I consider New Mexico to be one of our nation's hidden gems. It's a really great state. I love it. So here it is, guys. Downtown Las Cruces. It also has photogrammetry here, too, so you need to fly over the city. This here's Las Cruces. Down this area here is New Mexico State University, home of the New Mexico State Cowboys, one of the two Division I schools here in the NCAA football. The other one being the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. But New Mexico is an absolutely gorgeous state. And the great thing about New Mexico too is there's just so much interesting geography in this. It's got from white gypsum sands to caverns to mountains and forest. There's a ton to offer in New Mexico. Why I think it's such a great state for general aviation. Great GA state. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna climb up to 8,000 feet. So we're going to climb up to 8,000 feet as we make our way. So we say goodbye to Las Cruces, and we'll go ahead and talk about New Mexico for a bit. Let's discuss about New Mexico itself in a nutshell. So in a nutshell, New Mexico is one of the most interesting U.S. states. This is a southwestern U.S. state. It's also one of the mountain states of the Southern Rocky Mountains and one of the four corner states along with Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, as well as bordering Texas, Oklahoma, and an international border with the Mexican states of Chihuahua and Sonora. The largest city is Albuquerque, and Santa Fe is the state capital. And fun fact, it is the oldest state capital in the United States, as the government seat of Nuevo Mexico in New Spain. And it's the highest elevation of any state capital, too. Despite the fact that New Mexico is actually our nation's fifth largest U.S. state, it's one of the least densely populated with only 2.1 million residents, which is 36th overall in population and 45th in population density. It has extremely varied geography between forest and mountains, sparse deserts, and more. New Mexico is also blessed with not only great geographic diversity, but cultural diversity. 1/3 of all its land is federally owned, and it has additional 15 national parks and monuments, 3 of them being UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the most of any American state. And it's one of the only 7 majority-minority states, the highest percentage of Hispanic and Latino Americans, as well as the second highest percentage of Native Americans in the United States after Alaska. And of course, it is also extremely culturally diverse. Its state flag is one of the most well-liked of anyone, as it references the eclectic origins, including the ancient sun symbol of the Zia tribe, scarlet and gold flag. And New Mexico also stands apart with its own cultural influence, from its cuisine to folk music to architecture and more. So New Mexico definitely is a really unique state. Very, very interesting place to visit. But New Mexico's history is quite a long one, in fact. Before the Spanish arrived, the first native known inhabitants were the Clovis culture, from early as around 21,000 to 2300 BC. Earlier inhabitants include the Mongolian, and ancestral Pueblo cultures, which are characterized by sophisticated pottery work and urban development. Pueblos and their remnants found all over New Mexico indicate the scale of a lot of these dwellings in the New Mexico area. And the vast trade networks of these ancient populations led to legends throughout Mesoamerica and the Aztec Empire of an unseen northern empire that arrived in their own, which they called Yankuic Mexico, which literally translates to a New Mexico, hence eventually the state's name. Pretty cool, huh? Aztec legends of a prosperous empire to the north was the primary basis for the mythical Seven Seas of Gold, which spurred exploration by the Spanish conquistador following their conquest of the Aztecs. And many prominent explorers have visited the New Mexico area, include Alvar Nuez Cabeza de Vaca, Andres Dorantes de Carranza, and Marcos de Niza, to name a few. Of course, the first major settlement here in this area was Santa Fe. It was known then as Villa Real de la Santa Fe de San Francisco de Asis. 1610 was established by Pedro de Peralta as a more permanent capital at the foot of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in 1610, and then eventually became state capital. One interesting key about this part of its history was, of course, there was a Pueblo revolt that drove the Spanish out during the 17th century for nearly over a decade. Of course, after the Pueblo leader died, Diego de Vargas restored the area to Spanish rule, with the Pueblos offering much more cultural and religious liberties. Returning settlers then later founded La Villa de Albuquerque in 1706, which you know later as Albuquerque. And of course, it was named after the new Viceroy of Spain at the time, as a trade center. Of course, beyond forging better relations with the Pueblos, governors were forbearing their approach to indigenous people, which, such as the governor Tomas Velez Capuchin, its large reservations in New Mexico are a major part of Spanish legacy of honoring indigenous land claims in New Mexico. However, that being said, the relations remain nebulous and very complex, mainly with the 18th century with raids by the Navajo, Apache, and especially the Comanche tribe, inhibited the prosperity of New Mexico. Combine that with the region's harsh environmental and all that, fostered a greater degree of self-reliance as well as cooperation between the Pueblo people and the colonists. So as a result, compared to many other European places, indigenous communities actually have a large amount of autonomy. Of course, when the Spanish lost control of Mexico, this area became part of the First Mexican Empire in 1821, following the independence of Mexico. Upon succession, then the Republic of Texas claimed the portion east of the Rio Grande, and as a result, there was definitely some conflict between New Mexico and all that. Of course, following the victory of the U.S. during the U.S.-Mexican War, Mexico ceded its northern territory to the U.S., which includes California, Texas, but especially in this case, New Mexico was also part of it as well. And the Americans were initially heavy-handed with their treatment of former Mexican citizens, triggered a revolt in Tao in 1847, which led to the death of the U.S. territorial governor and the class of civilian government. Of course, one major thing that happened, of course, was after the Texas was admitted as a state, it tended to claim the land of the eastern portion of New Mexico east, while the California Republican Desert once claimed part of western Mexico. But eventually, in 1850, those claims were dropped. Texas received $10 million in federal funds, California was granted statehood, and eventually establishing the Utah Territory, which allowed New Mexico to keep its established land claims. Of course, when the Civil War broke out in 1861, both the Confederate and Union governments claimed ownership over the New Mexico territory. But ultimately, the Union was able to secure New Mexico. Of course, the end of the war ended up seeing some rapid economic development. Settlement in the state, which attracted a lot of homesteaders, ranchers, cowboys, businessmen, and outlaws. Many of the folklore characters of the American West genre had their origins in New Mexico. Of course, also another consequence of the Civil War was the intense conflict with the indigenous people, and the withdrawal of troops and material for the war effort had raids by hostile tribes, which later on, the federal government did try to subdue many of the tribes. Of course, one interesting thing as well, and as a result, the political and cultural clashes between these groups also culminated in mob violence, including the lynchings of Native, Hispanic, and Mexican peoples, as was attempted at the Fresno shootout in 1884. Nevertheless, prominent figures from across the communities in both parties attempted to fight this prejudice to forge a new, cohesive, multi-ethnic New Mexican identity. And they include many lawmen like Baca and Garrett, and governors Curry, Hagerman, and Otero. Well, allowing New Mexico to have some sort of stability. Of course, one major change and one very important one that happened was in 1912, as New Mexico finally joined the United U.S. as the 47th state. It had been eligible for statehood 60 years earlier, but due to the perception of its majority Hispanic population, it was considered to be alien to U.S. values. Of course, it did still become a statehood. Of course, one thing that really changed New Mexico history was an oil discovery in the town of Hobbs, and became the most important single discovered oil in New Mexico's history, allowing New Mexico to be transformed. Of course, the event that also changed New Mexico was the Second World War. You see, patriotism was very highly among Americans during this time, just like it was in World War I. However, New Mexico became extremely important for one major reason. Los Alamos. And that's because we're going to be visiting the Manhattan Project, founded, where the atomic bombs were manufactured, and of course, the first bomb was tested in the Trinity test site between Sirocco and Alamogordo, which is now White Sands Missile Range, was tested. And speaking of White Sands Missile Range, if you look to your left, we're actually here. So if you guys don't know, this is the White Sands National Park. This is also the test range. This is where the nuclear bombs were tested, right in this area here. The world's first nuclear bomb was tested right here. Looks like we're finally making our way over to New Mexico. This was where the world's nuclear weapons were tested, here in this part of New Mexico. Hey, Planet Neutral, good to see you, my dude. Welcome on in, Planet Neutral. I hope you're having a good day. We're just into New Mexico. So this is White Sands National Park. Right over here to our right is Holloman Air Base, just right outside the city of Alamogordo. Yes, we're right in the White Sands Missile Range. So yeah, speaking of the devil, we're actually here. Flying over it. Of course, its rough terrain made an attractive location for nuclear weapon testing. And of course, as a legacy, New Mexico tends to see a large amount of federal government spending on military and research institutions. And a lot of military bases were dropped. Were featured here as well. Of course, New Mexico also nearly doubled its population between 1940 and 60. In addition to federal personnel and agencies, many residents and businesses had moved here due to the warm climate and low taxing. Then during the mid-20th century, of course, a lot of art institution stuff have came around. Santa Fe grew into one of the world's great art centers thanks to that of Georgia O'Keeffe. Many others along the Canyon Road. And now during the 21st century, many employment growth areas in New Mexico include circuitry, scientific research, infotechnology, casinos, art, food, film, and media were a big part of New Mexico's growth. Of course, COVID did hit New Mexico quite badly, but New Mexico is still going through this pretty. So that wraps up as well. Oh yes, I didn't know you went there last fall, Planet Neutral. Yeah, I would like to visit all the parks. I think one of my parents' friends visited White Sands National Park. Really cool area. And by the way, for those who don't know, the white sands here in White Sands National Park is not sand, it's gypsum, actually. And the origin of why White Sands National Park has gypsum and not and the reason why it's made of gypsum, well, the reason is because a lot of the climate and the gypsum for the mountain ranges ran off in this area right here into the lake. And when that lake drew it up, well, the sand still remains. But gypsum is actually used in a wide variety of products, by the way, too. It's very well known for used for all sorts of stuff. Drywall, toothpaste, and more. Used pretty cool stuff. We're heading our way to our first stop here in Sierra Romeo is our first stop of the day. So that will be our first stop of the day. Of course, one of the other major parts of New Mexico we're going to be talking about here today is going to be geography. So I'm actually going to climb up to 12,500 feet. Well, those 500 feet will be our new altitude. We'll be climbing up here as well. So speaking about geography, New Mexico is a really unique state in that area. Geography is actually something very unique about New Mexico, is its geography. In fact, New Mexico may be one of our most geographically diverse U.S. states. It's the 5th largest state in the United States after Alaska, Texas, California, Montana. A lot of people like to depict New Mexico as some sort of desert, where that's not actually the case. New Mexico is actually one of our most geographically diverse landscapes of any U.S. state. You could find from wide open-carved deserts to verdant grasslands, broken mesas, and high snow-capped peaks. Of course, New Mexico is around the state covered in timberland in New Mexico, with heavily forested mountains dominating the north. You can find all that here. Of course, the eastern state is by the Colorado Plateau, with junipers and the Chilean deserts in the south. And also, 4/5 of New Mexico is higher than 4,000 feet above sea level. The highest peak is Wheeler Peak in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. In the northeast, we'll be flying up that. While the lowest point is Red Bluff Reservoir in the southeast portion of the state. And of course, it's home to the 4th longest river in the U.S., the Rio Grande. And more. So, yes, New Mexico's geography is one of its unique advantages about the state. Not many has the unique geography of New Mexico. And we'll be flying all sorts of different regions here. Of course, climate-wise, it's well known for its dry temperate climate. Overall, it's semi-arid to arid, with continental and alpine areas at higher elevations. Average temperatures can range from 65 degrees southeast to below 40 degrees in the winter. During the summer, they can exceed 100 degrees at elevation below 5,000 feet. It ranges between 99 degrees and lower elevations and 78 degrees higher elevation. Its stable climate and sparse population provide clear skies and less light pollution. So New Mexico is very popular for a lot of astronomical observatories. You can find them all over New Mexico. The highest temperature ever recorded in New Mexico, by the way, was 122 degrees at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in Loving in 1994. The lowest recorded temperature was in 1951, negative 50 degrees. Yes, negative 50. That's true. You don't think it'll get that cold in New Mexico. But here we are. It can actually. Of course, one final area about New Mexico that I think should be brought into a lot more questioning is gotta be its flora and fauna. And again, thanks to all these different topography, it provides a diverse set of habitat for many plants and animals. The upper Sonoran zone is by far the most prominent, about 3/4 of the state, which includes most of the plains, foothills, and valleys above 4,500 feet, defined by prairie grasses, pines, and juniper shrubs. Mountains, the mountains north provides a lot of vegetation, from juniper to conifer, spurred aspen, and it provides also support for diverse wildlife species. There's quite a lot of them, in fact. You can find things from black bears to bighorn sheep, bobcats, cougars, deer, and elk. And they live mainly above the 7,000 feet. While in the lower elevations, you can find coyotes, jackrabbits, kangaroo rats, javelinas, pronghorn, western diamondback rattlesnakes, and even turkeys. Of course, the state bird, the iconic roadrunner, yes, the one you see in the Looney Tunes, well, it's abundant in the southeast part of Mexico, New Mexico. And fun fact about the little roadrunners, by the way, they're actually part of the cuckoo family of birds. Yes, they're part of the cuckoo family. Um, but one of the unique things about the roadrunners, of course, and what's this? Oh my gosh, Sid squadron with a rate of 67. Hey, good to see you, Sid. Good to see you, my dude. Welcome on in. Welcome to New Mexico, guys. Tons of people here. Sid, I hope you had a fantastic stream, my dude. Let's look at the chat. Funk E420 Monkey, good to see you. Kev, good to see you as well. Local Hombre, Part 4, Walkman Flavor, Early Guy. Good to have all you guys in. Thank you all so much for the raid, guys. So, if you guys don't know about me, I'm Viper Strike 95. I stream here on Twitch 2 days a week, Fridays and Sundays. I've been streaming here since 2021. I've done many Flight Sim series since Flight Sim 2020, and I've done plenty of series. I've done an Around the World series back in 2022, 2023, and now I'm working on my first series for 2024, the 50 States and 50 Streams, where we fly all 50 US states. This is our 47th stream of this series. We're flying over New Mexico today. If you look behind us, by the way, this is White Sands Missile Range in National Park. This was where the world's nuclear bombs were tested back in 1940s. For Trinity Test Site. Really cool stuff. Oh my gosh, Murph rated 2. What? Murphy's here too? I thought Sid's here, but I didn't think Murphy was rated 2. Oh boy, what a day. Murphy, I hope you enjoyed your trip to the Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is some of the prettiest areas. So I need to get a shout out for Sid and Murph. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, you guys have been absolutely insane. So, Crappy Tigers, Kev, Iran, Rat Hall, oh my gosh, all you guys. Where do I begin with the people? That's insane. Guys, thank you so much for coming here. It's been an absolute pleasure being here. So New Mexico, one of the really cool states. So I was talking about Doubt. I mean, where are the follows? Punk Eve, Cooper 20 Monkey, Carp 4, Cool Luke, Infinity Knights, Crafty Tiger, and Dower. Thank you all for your follows, my dude. Thank you guys so much. Man, you guys made my day. It's a blessing. So I was going to show off the flora and fauna of New Mexico while you guys were in, but yes, the bird you see in the picture is the greater roadrunner, part of the cuckoo family, but they're well known for being snake eaters, of course. They feed on things like insects, spiders, centipedes, and of course, snakes. They even eat snakes too. Pretty cool birds, and they're one of the neatest animals. Good to see you, Bags, JT90. Good to have you guys here too. Thank you so much. Oh, boys. But yeah, I've really been enjoying the series. We're only a couple more streams left to go on this trip, by the way. If you guys are interested and want to catch up to my streaming stuff, I have my Discord up. And by the way, you guys are more than welcome to fly along with me as well. And here's our route. We're just in the Southeast Asian server. Here's our flight. We're flying to Sierra Romeo Romeo for our first leg. You guys are more than welcome to catch up on here too. But yes, some interesting tidbits about New Mexico for you guys who just came in. Believe it or not, New Mexico's home to our oldest state capital, Santa Fe. Has been around since 1610. It's the nation's oldest state capital. It's also got one of the most geographically diverse areas in the United States. Arid deserts, snow-capped peaks, forest all around, and more. Tons of amazing stuff in New Mexico. So we're going to be landing here in our first stop very shortly. Yes, we're going to be landing at Sierra Romeo Romeo. That is just outside of the village of Rudisio, is where we're going to be landing at here. But guys, this has been absolutely one insane raid, an insane day. Easily the most people have had in a long time. The scenery is just gorgeous up here, guys. Again, like, great thing about doing this series, by the way, is when you're flying over the United States, like, this gives you a greater appreciation for our U.S. states. Like, I've been now flying different parts of the U.S. I haven't even flown very much. Like, I've done streams in Kansas, even the Dakotas. Gave me a whole new appreciation for these states. So this is Sierra Blanca Peak to our right. That's not our tallest point in New Mexico. That honor is Wheeler Peak, which we will technically be heading through during our visit here. House. We're going to be turn left here right soon, and we're going to make our first landing. Now, I do want to ask you guys something important. I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Get to enjoy all this stuff here. And absolutely support. So one of the really cool things I'm going to be doing in the future is after this series is over, I'm having 2 new series I'm going to be working on. The first series I'll be working on is for the Friday streams. I'll be doing a all-country series. I used to try to do one back in 24 and earlier on MSF's 2020 and 24, but it would have taken too long. So I'm working on an all-country series, but this time we visit each of the countries individually. It's A to Z, and we'll be visiting every country on Earth. And we'll learn more about each of the nations, their culture, their cuisine, a bit of their history too, and the historic cities and landmarks. We'll be checking that out on the Fridays. And then on Sundays is going to be a national park series, which again is going to be in the United States once again. But I really wanted to do the national park series. I love national parks. I love general aviation. So if you love bush flying or backcountry, I think this would be an amazing place to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and descend a little bit here. We're going to descend back to 1,000. Head and descend. Just going to do that. Just Nashville's absolutely beautiful state. Oh, that means a lot, Kev. Thank you so much for the comments. I put a lot of work into planning and all that. That's something I'm very proud of doing, is working on the plans and working things out. It's something I work a lot of. I always plan my stuff in advance, though, too. That way I have more time and to plan things out and go through all of it. That's something I definitely appreciate. So in this series, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more of the 50 state streets planned the next couple weeks. So next week, by the way, we only have 4 more streams left in this series, believe it or not. Next week, on next Friday, we'll be covering the U.S. state of Arizona. We'll be flying from Tucson over to Page. We'll be visiting Phoenix, the Grand Canyon, and more. Then the next Sunday is going to be the last frontier, Alaska. We have Alaska, one of my favorite states, and it's a state I've been to a lot over the years. And we're going to fly around Southeast Alaska, one of my favorite areas of the United States to fly over, Southeast Alaska. Absolutely gorgeous. And then, of course, in 2 weeks, and then the week after is Hawaii, the last U.S. state to cover. We'll be flying through all the islands, and of course, the Sunday afterwards is our bonus stream, Washington, D.C., nation's capital. And that will wrap up the entire series, guys. I can't believe this series is going to be ending soon. Yeah, I like having a theme, and I like to explore all of this sort of stuff. Because I think I really want to explore all sorts of stuff. I don't want to just explore one thing. I want to explore all of the things. And speaking about the national park stuff coming up as well, the national park's going to be similar. We're going to be checking out all the national parks, all 63 of them. We'll be starting, by the way, at Yellowstone National Park. We'll actually be doing a prequel thing. We'll be learning more about the history of the National Park Service. But then our first national park will be Yellowstone. We'll check out the legendary Yellowstone National Park. Will be our first national park, and we go through all of them in order until we reach the last national park of the series, the most recent, New River Gorge National Park in West Virginia. So yes, we have a lot of stuff to cover in those series. That's going to be 63 streams, so it's going to be 63 Sundays, you guys. We're going to go ahead and prepare for the landing here at Akira Sierra Romeo. Yes, the 51st state. Yes, because, no, the reason is that, yeah, I mean, technically the 51st, it's not really a state, but it is our nation's capital, and I think it should still be covered. That's why it's a bonus, because it's not part of the main states, but it is our nation's capital, and it definitely should be discussed. It's just, it's not a main state. But yeah, there has been attempts of making Washington, D.C. the 51st state. There's actually been attempts by various government officials over the years, so that's why it's being covered. Here we go, guys. First up, welcome to Rodizio, beautiful mountain village community, gorgeous. So we'll stop here for a minute. If you guys are more than welcome to join on in and join me on this flight. You guys are, remember, this is a group flight. You guys are all more than welcome to, by the way. Here we go, guys. Welcome to New Mexico, this part of New Mexico. So we're going to stop here. That way, if anyone wants to join us, we can get people on board. Here we are, guys. Our first stop here. We'll take a bit of about a minute break. If any of you guys are welcome to join on in. By the way, Eskimos One server, we're in the Southeast Asian server, and you feel for the 700,000 people who live in DC with taxation without government representation. Yeah, I mean, technically the reason why DC wasn't even a state to begin with is because a of some of the amendments of law back in the day. That's why Washington, D.C. was not a state. It was due to legislation. I believe the reason why it was that was because it was the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1801. That's why it's not a U.S. state, because of that. I'll cover it plenty when we get to D. So let's go ahead and let's see. Let's go ahead and get ready for our next leg. We're going to head to Albuquerque. Our next leg is going to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the largest city in the state. We're going to go ahead and head on back to the taxi area. But I mean, we're going to fly at 11,000 feet. And we're going to be at a heading of 324 degrees. So how long are you going to be on for today? Just be on for about 2 hours. My streams are usually about 2.5 hours, give and take. That's where I'm usually going to be. 2.5 hours, Kev. Going to be where I'm usually going to be on and off week. Let's go ahead and get taken up. Hey, Mortal Zap! See you, my dude. We actually got some people in here today. That's awesome. Oh, and the Lancaster? I don't have it, sadly. I don't have the Lancaster. Crap. I haven't bought a lot of planes yet. Like I said, I'm still waiting for many of them to be compatible with 2024. That's probably why I haven't bought very many, sadly. I'm gonna go ahead and cruise up. So we're going to go talk about Albuquerque's economy for a bit as we climb up. So Albuquerque definitely be a pretty cool state. No worries about that, Kev. Definitely get something to eat. Don't want to do anything on an empty stomach. Oh, and by the way, guys, if you haven't been to one of my streams before, all the notes I do is I made these notes for each of the areas we're flying into. So we're going to talk about New Mexico's economy a bit. So New Mexico's economically speaking, New Mexico is mainly built on oil and gas production, industry, entertainment industry, high-tech scientific research, tourism, and government spending. Its gross state product is around $95 billion in the U.S. in 2021, and per capita income was $45,000, which is the third lowest in the country, behind after West Virginia and Mississippi. Traditionally dependent on resource extraction, ranching, and railroad, New Mexico has increasingly shifted towards services, high-end manufacturing, and tourism. In fact, in 2021, had a record-breaking 39 million tourists come visit New Mexico. this past year, and has even greater investment in research. But of course, one huge part of Mexico's economy is oil and gas. Yes, New Mexico has the second largest crude oil and ninth largest natural gas producer in the country. Yes, it even overtook North Dakota. It's because, well, you found the Permian San Juan basins in New Mexico, which account for these resources. Um, the value in oil and gas produced in 2000 was 8.2 billion, and it counted even more so in the later years, especially with hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. It led to an even larger increase of oil produced in New Mexico. As a result, New Mexico's gas operations were pretty important. Of course, like many other parts of the western United States, New Mexico receives royalty from federally owned land to oil and gas companies. In fact, it has the highest proportions of it in the U.S. state. And it has the fourth highest total acreage sold to the gas industry, around 1.1 million acres. And of course, it's also second to Wyoming at 4.3 million acres that's currently leased. So yes, the oil and gas industry are a very big part of New Mexico's economy. Of course, on the other side of this as well, technology has been a bigger deal. You see, technology has been a huge part of New Mexico's history ever since the 20th century. The Rio Grande Tech Corridor is a very much an emerging sector for technology, especially around the Albuquerque region, where you can find facilities like Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos, the very large Array, as well as private companies like Intel, HP, and Facebook. Of course, New Mexico has been a tech and science hub for the United States since the mid-20th century because of World War II, mainly with Los Alamos being the site for the Manhattan Project. In fact, you can find the Trinity test site in the White Sands Missile Range. And it's still going on. That legacy is still here, even after all these years. Nowadays, New Mexico's been a big part of the space age and stuff too. In space culture, because guess what? The space program was actually considered to be birthed in New Mexico, thanks to stars like rocket fuel in Roswell. The first rocket in space actually flew from the missile range, and of course, space flying with Spaceport America, just north of Las Cruces. So yes, New Mexico is absolutely a tech hub. Very, very notable for that. New Mexico was the capital of New Mexico. And speaking of this, for Nuevo Mexico, it was actually the capital of Nuevo Mexico, part of Mexico. Spanish actually put this as one of their capitals. But it's actually true. It's a big part of it. And then, of course, for agriculture, you'd be quite surprised. You would think with this area being pretty arid, wouldn't think New Mexico would actually have a lot of agriculture, but you're wrong. In fact, New Mexico has been a very much important area for agriculture for 2,500 years. In fact, it contributes 40 billion to its economy. And of course, state vegetable and New Mexico's most notable crop is undoubtedly the New Mexico chili peppers and pinto beans. The New Mexico chili is the most famous crop in New Mexico and ranks by far the first in chili pepper acreage. It's also one of the few United States commercially producing pistachios and pine nuts. Its largest combined is actually dairy, funnily enough. And of course, the rich history of the livestock herder, the KLRU, is main part of all the ranches in the state. So New Mexico has a lot of very unique for agriculture and food. And lastly, one major area that's seen a lot of growth over the years is tourism. And it makes sense considering New Mexico has a really distinct culture, its rich art scene, favorable climate, and diverse geography have been major tourism drivers. In fact, it's been even around since the late 19th century when many travelers suffered from respiratory illnesses came to New Mexico to help be beneficial for their lungs. Continued to grow ever since. And it's continuing to also have more media attention, especially with the culinary scene, including numerous winners of the James Beard Foundation Awards. And outdoor recreation has been very big in New Mexico, with nature reserves, public parks, resorts, hiking trail, and hunting and fishing areas. It also helps that New Mexico also has 2 beautiful national parks. White Sands National Park, the newest national park in New Mexico, and of course, the original New Mexico National Park, Carlsbad Caverns. One of the very original national parks here in Mexico. So that wraps up our economy section here. Let's take a look outside and see who's with us. So, beautiful see you here today. We're heading to Albuquerque, ABQ. Really cool city with a really neat history. So I hope you guys are enjoying the stream. If you're liking the content here on this channel and you want to learn more about our streaming stuff, smash that follow button, support the channel. We're doing 2 days a week. We're doing plenty of adventures over the next couple of months. We have plenty of stuff to go through. So we got a lot of stuff going through. Here we go. We're gonna be covering all parts of. Hey, Common Crazy, good to see you. Oh, good to see you, Common Crazy. I hope you're doing well. We're heading to Albuquerque for our second leg. We started in Las Cruces, and we made our way to Soroco. We went to Rodicio for our first stop. I was just reading something. That's why I was a little quiet. But we're going to be heading over to Albuquerque, and then for our last leg, we'll be going from Albuquerque over to Taos. We'll fly over Santa Fe as well, our state capital of New Mexico. So that's where we're going here today. It is a little quiet. I'm just trying to chill myself out a little bit. So we're going to go visit New Mexico. Beautiful state. Beautiful area, of course. So we'll be sitting down in a little bit. Once we cross over the tall peak, one of the tall peaks further ahead, we're going to go ahead and fly on down to a lower altitude. So we can check out New Mexico, Albuquerque itself. So about New Mexico, to continue on forward about New Mexico, of course, is going to be is transportation law. You see, New Mexico has actually had a very long history with transportation. In fact, it dates all the way back to even the pre-European times with Chaco Canyon and the builders of the Pueblans. However, the most important area of trade here for New Mexico's history is, of course, the Santa Fe Trail. It was part of the later big network known as the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, aka the Silver Route. And it was a big part of trade between the U.S. and Mexico back in the 19th century. Santa Fe Trail basically took your way from Missouri, from Franklin, Missouri, over to Santa Fe, New Mexico. A big part of all of it. But of course, the El Camino Real connected from New Mexico City over to Santa Fe. It was a big part of trails, and it's even become a national trail nowadays. Of course, it was also important for railroads and stuff back in the later half of the 19th century, then later on with the roads. Speaking of automobiles, most people in New Mexico travel via automobiles. There's about over 59,000 route miles of highway as of 2000, and it's mainly been important for the local areas. Of course, New Mexico has often been plagued by poor road conditions, the lack of funding, and structural issues. And drunk driving is also an issue too. In terms of rail, New Mexico has about 2,300 route miles of railroads in 2000. In addition to local railroads and our tourist lines, it also has its own railroad, the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railway, with the state of Colorado. But nowadays, it's not nearly as big anymore. But there is still some Amtrak service around this area as well. Of course, the state also has 4 commercial airports. By far the busiest is Albuquerque International Sunport, who will be landing next. The other airports include Lady County Regional, Roswell International Air Center, and Santa Fe Regional. Most of the airports are generally small GA airports, with the exception of the massive spaceport of Spaceport America, which was used by private suborbital flights. That's what they mainly. So that is about New Mexico's transportation for you. We're going to be heading down pretty close to. Definitely with the landscape, of course. So let me go ahead and do it quickly. So. We're just about halfway over to Albuquerque, New Mexico, the most populous city in New Mexico. So one of the really cool things about New Mexico, speaking of which, going back for our notes, one interesting thing about New Mexico is is gotta be its chili pepper. The New Mexico chili pepper, by the way, is its most important crop in the country. But these chilies come from the chili pepper of it was first grown by the Pueblo and Hispanic communities in Nueva Mexico. But they were later used to develop the modern peppers by horticulturist Fabian Garcia at New Mexico State University, which grows from a ripe green to a ripened red, and it's very popular with Southwest U.S. cuisine, most notably New Mexico's cuisine. It tastes similar to a lightly pungent or like garlic with a sweet, spicy taste. And they use it in all sorts of food items. You can put them into enchiladas, burgers, burritos, french fries, or even rice. It can even be served fried or even baked. Very popular cuisines. That's mainly the green chilies. The red ones are mainly dried and ground to powder, turned into red chili sauce. In fact, you can even find a whole festival of it. In Hatch, New Mexico. But yeah, very cool stuff. These chilies are really a big part of New Mexico's. So, we're now getting closer to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're about halfway to Albuquerque. ABQ is going to be our next stop, by the way. So Albuquerque is the state's largest city, and one of the most historic cities in the country, founded in 1706 as La Villa de Albuquerque by Santa Fe Governor Francisco Cuervo y Valdez, named after the Duke of Albuquerque at the time, Francisco Fernandez de la Cueva. And Albuquerque was especially important as it was a major outpost on the El Camino Real, linking Mexico City to the northernmost territories of New Spain. It's located in the Albuquerque Basin, flanked by the Sandia Mountains to the west, Mesa to the west. This city is the 32nd most populous city in the country with 564,000 residents. Its metro area is around 1.1 million people. It's New Mexico's main hub for technology, fine arts, and media companies. It's home to several historic landmarks, including the Old Town of Albuquerque. You can also find the University of New Mexico, founded in 1889, and of course, it's world famous for its International Balloon Fiesta that occurs in every October. And it's the largest fire balloon gathering in the world, as well as the Gathering of Nations, the largest powwow in the United States and North America, and of course, its diverse restaurant scene. Some of the finest restaurant scene in this part of the United States. But yeah, Albuquerque has a ton to offer for the inquisitive traveler today. Of course, Albuquerque is extremely rich with culture. Of course, the International Balloon Fiesta happens every early October. You also have the New Mexico State Fair that's held in every September. You have the historic Old Town Albuquerque, with tons of historic buildings all across the old town, from old churches, town plazas, and more. But yeah, Albuquerque, really cool city. I think it's very underrated, and I think it's a really, really neat place. Of course, Albuquerque's one flaw is crime. Albuquerque's always struggled with crime. Crime is always something that sadly Albuquerque has always struggled with, is especially with the homeless. Has always been a bigger problem. But I mean, culture-wise, Albuquerque is extremely diverse. That's why it's one of the really cool cities here in the United States. Definitely really cool area. It's also where many of the sports events in New Mexico occur. With some of the sports teams, mainly the most notable team in the city is the minor league baseball's Albuquerque Isotopes, which, no joke, it actually comes from The Simpsons, which involved the Springfield Isotopes considered relocating to Albuquerque, and the name gained popularity and it stuck. Even though it also made sense because New Mexico is where nuclear technology was developed, so that name actually makes sense. So go figure. In our next stop is Albuquerque International Sunport. Is going to be our next stop. And it's by far New Mexico's busiest airport. Around 5.4 million passengers annually, with over 400 flights on a daily basis. And it's a focused airport for Southwest Airlines, which is around half of all passengers. And it features a wide range of restaurants and shops, including national brands and even regional brands that are local to the area. And it's unique among U.S. states for having its low-line structure and the Pueblo Revival architecture all throughout the airport. It represents the rich cultural history of New Mexico. But the modern airport itself was actually built in the 1930s. In fact, its 5.4 million is not the record, but it flies to destinations all across the country, but mainly in the south and western parts of the state. Seattle, San Francisco, LA, Vegas, Phoenix, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and in some eastern destinations as well, but mainly it flies around the western United States. Is mainly where it flies. But it's a really neat little airport. So, so we'll be descending here very shortly. And we'll be descending here very shortly. And we're going to descend around 6,500 feet. I think we're going to descend around that. Yeah, some pretty big stuff coming up this week, of course. There really isn't a lot too much in the flight sim add-on stuff. I know the Lancaster is finally coming out. I know a lot of people are excited to have the Lancaster in Microsoft Flight Sim. Imagine Sim rebuilt Atlanta for 2024 as a free upgrade, which is great news for all those people in Atlanta. The PMUG 777-200LR got released, but I have no need for the 200LR. The cargo is the only 200 I would want. But still cool for those who want it. But the one I'm waiting for PMDG is their 737 because I want to grab my hands on 737. I missed the 73 family immensely. So, missing that for a bit. We're gonna go ahead and descend. Mexico's a gorgeous state, and we get to see plenty of the scenery here in this part of the country. So we're going to go ahead and make our way over to So we're going to land at runway 26, where we're going to land in New Mexico. So this is the Sonia Mountain Range, by the way. So one of the really cool attractions you can do here is you can actually take a cable car up here. You take a Sandia Peak Tramway. You can take the tram car up to over the Sandia Crest, and you get an absolutely and you can take an amazing view up to the top of the peak. But you get some absolutely amazing views of the. It's one of the most popular attractions here in Albuquerque. I mean, there's a lot to do here. Really cool stuff. Here's the Sandia Crest to our right. We're going to land here in beautiful New Mexico. Man, 47 people. Thank you guys so much for sticking around for my stream. I really do appreciate all the new falls, man. This has been absolutely. Have all you guys here. Correct the 850 mark. I'm just halfway to 900. $6,500 feet. Here, guys, we're just about to make it to our second stop. Let's see. here we are, guys, in beautiful Albuquerque. We're right in the Rio Grande Valley. Here we go. So here we go. We're down in Albuquerque. You. Here we go. We'll stop right here for about a minute or two. If anyone else wants to join on in, we're in the Southeast Asian server, and we're flying. We're just in Albuquerque to make our second stop of the day. We'll be sitting here for a bit. Yeah, beautiful New Mexico City. Gorgeous. And for the last leg is going to be a pretty good one. We're going to be going over Albuquerque, and we'll fly into Santa Fe, and then head our way over to northeast New Mexico through some of the beautiful peaks and valleys areas. And we're going to make our landing in Taos, one of the most historic cities in northern New Mexico. So, we'll be getting ready to go and prepare ourselves for the last leg very shortly. This last leg will take us around 113 nautical miles. Fuel situation. Our fuel situation is going pretty good so far, so I think we have enough for one last leg. Here we go, guys. Let's go ahead and finish the. Here, guys, downtown Albuquerque is where we're flying to. So not far from this area is the University of New Mexico. Their athletics teams, by the way, are known as the Lobos. They're pretty good in basketball. Basketball is their best sport. Football, they're absolutely terrible. They're one of the nation's worst college football programs. But college basketball, on the other hand, they're actually a really solid program. Their basketball arena, particularly, is one of the nation's most difficult places to play, the pit. Very tough place to play. And yeah, here's the Isotope Stadium here, called the Albuquerque Isotopes. Here's downtown. Here's downtown Albuquerque. Pretty cool little area. Here's downtown Albuquerque. Here's the Sandia Crest. We're gonna go around it actually. Yeah, you can take the tramway up to the top of the Sandia Crest and get some amazing views. The views are absolutely nuts. Incredible beauty here. let's go ahead and talk about the rest of New Mexico while we're here. Let's talk about the culture of stuff in New Mexico, because New Mexico's culture is extremely rich. Compared to many other U.S. states, I think New Mexico is even richer than most U.S. states. Uniquely, New Mexican culture is a very unique fusion of indigenous Spanish, Hispanic, and American influences, and selected in its unique demographics, toponyms, cuisine, dialect, and identity. Compared to other Western U.S. states, its Spanish and Mexican heritage remain more visible and enduring. The fact it has the oldest, most populous, and important province in New Spain's northern periphery. Like other states in the American Southwest, New Mexico bears the legacy of the Old West period of Western expansion, with cattle ranching, cowboys, pioneers, Santa Fe Trail, and conflicts between settlers and Native Americans. And of course, many parts of it as well. And finally, of course, New Mexico is a very important area for Native American culture. So 200,000 residents, about 1/10 of the state's population, are indigenous descent, ranking third in size and second proportionally nationwide. And it's home to 23 federally recognized tribal nations with their own unique culture, history, and identity. Of course, one interesting part about New Mexico's culture has got to be its art, literature, and media. Some of the earliest work New Mexico artists that survive today are the Members Indians, whose black and white pottery could be mistaken for modern arts, except it was produced before 1130 CE. You can find them in the Deming Luma Members Museum in Luna County, Mexico, in Demling, and the Western New Mexico University Museum. Of course, one of the great art scenes in the country is Santa Fe, which has been around for decades and has hosted many prominent figures, including Bruce Nauman, Richard Tuttle, John Collin, and more. And the capital city has several famous art museums, but most notably the New Mexico Museum of Art, as well as the Museum of International Folk Arts, the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, and many others. And colonies for artists and writers thrive, and the small city teams with many art galleries, including one for Native American markets. Of course, Albuquerque also hosts many of the cultural events and institutions in Albuquerque, and of course has hosted many festivals and museums over the years. Of course, the state has strong ties to its Spanish heritage, and old Spanish traditions like zarzuelas and flamenco are actually popular in the state, despite the fact that it's in the United States, but it still tightly holds on to its heritage. In fact, the University of Mexico is the only institute of higher education in the world with a program dedicated to flamenco. And of course, throughout the earlier 20th century, there's a thriving Hispanic school for literature and scholarship being produced in both English and Spanish. Tons of major writers and stuff over the years. Of course, New Mexico has also been growing as a filming location for many types of series, including vampires, sunshine cleaning, long-mired, but the most important of all these media properties is Breaking Bad. If you guys have never heard of Breaking Bad, you're probably living under a rock. It's considered by many to be one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and it's been mainly filmed around Albuquerque. And it's helped grow the city with tourism, of course. And then, of course, cuisine is another unique specialty in New Mexico. It has got to be its cuisine. It's unique and eclectic, using the various indigenous cuisines with those of Spanish and Mexican Hispanics, and it's shaped throughout a lot of history. But as a result, it's very different from the other Latin food originating elsewhere in the continental United States. And of course, its distinguishing characters include local spices, herbs, flavors of vegetables, particularly its red and green New Mexico chili peppers, pine nuts, and anise. Of course, there are several unique dishes that can only be found here in this part of New Mexico. They include fried bread style sopapilla, which is fried pastry, breakfast burritos, enchilada montada, stacked enchiladas, green chili stew, carne seca, thin sliced version of jerky, green chili burgers, pozole, a hominy dish, slow-fried beans, mainly pinto, calabactias, sauteed zucchini and summer squash, and carne adobada, pork marinated in red chili, as well as being, it's also a epicenter for the burgeoning Native American culinary movement, which chiefs of indigenous descent serve traditional cuisine through trucks. But yes, New Mexico has a very diverse cuisine found nowhere else in the contiguous 48 U.S. That's why I say New Mexico is a cultural power for a reason. Of course, lastly but not least, sports. Of course, it's not surprising New Mexico doesn't have any major league sports. Closest are the minor league Albuquerque Isotopes. They play in Albuquerque. They play in the Pacific Coast League of AAA ball, the affiliate for the Colorado Rockies. But it also hosts other minor league clubs, including New Mexico United of the United Soccer League Championship. But the big draw here is collegiate athletics. And of course, when you talk about New Mexico and collegiate athletics, you think of University of New Mexico and New Mexico State. And the rivalry is quite fierce in the Rio Grande rivalry. And it's a pretty fierce in-state rivalry. It gets overlooked because both programs aren't very good, but it means something for their state. Of course, one last thing, of course, is that New Mexico is also various hub for shooting sports. Mainly in Raton, New Mexico, the NRA Wellington Center is the largest and most comprehensive shooting range and training facility in the United States of America. But yes, that wraps up our cultural part of New Mexico. So guys, we're going to now be approaching very soon to the state capital and the oldest state capital in the United States, Santa Fe. Hey, good to see you, Monkey. Monkey. Good to see you. Oh, nice. Been to Northeast New Mexico. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, New Mexico's a really pretty state. It really gets overlooked as a U.S. state. It's understandable because New Mexico isn't very populated. It's why it gets overlooked, but it's a really cool state. My mom's been to New Mexico before. She really enjoyed her time there. So we're going to now fly over the state capital of New Mexico. Yes, we're going to be flying to Santa Fe. This capital city has a population of 87,000 people, which makes it New Mexico's fourth most populous city. It also is the highest U.S. capital in the country at with an elevation of about 7,000 feet above sea level. It's the oldest state capital, being founded back in 1610. It's the capital of Nuevo Mexico, province of New Spain, and it's the earliest European settlement west of the Mississippi. And it mainly prospered as a trade commercial hub for both Europeans and Native Americans, driven by the El Camino Real de Tierra adventure and the Santa Fe Trail. Of course, Santa Fe is very strong even to today, and it's very much a cultural hub. It's the cultural capital of New Mexico, if not the Southwest United States, thanks to its influences of Spanish, indigenous, and American influences, and it's one of the country's great art cities. In fact, it was so notable for art that in 2005, it was the first U.S. city to be inducted in the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. And the city is home to over 250 art galleries, large conservation museums, 3 art events, including the famous International Folk Art Market, and more. In fact, 1/10 of all employment is art, the highest proportion of any U.S. city in the country. Culture highlights include the Santa Fe Plaza, the Historic District, the Palace of Governors, and the Fiesta di Santa Fe. So, yes. Really cool stuff. Santa Fe's like awesome. Thank you so much, Funky Monkey. I really do appreciate you staying around. I really glad you're enjoying the stream and learning more about the U.S. states. I really do enjoy that. Like, I put a lot of work into coming up with all this sort of stuff and notes. So, Santa Fe, really cool city. We're going to go ahead, fly over slowly, of course. But yes, New Mexico's right on the banks of the mountains, so we're going to have to go pretty high. So after Santa Fe, we're going to go up and talk about some fun facts about New Mexico. And we're going to talk about some fun facts of some famous people here in our state. But New Mexico's a real. The reason I say this is one of our most underrated states is because compared to some of the other U.S. states, it kind of gets overlooked. Like, for example, Colorado gets overlooked because Colorado has way more people and has more diverse scenery and stuff. It gets overlooked compared to Arizona, which has been much more populous. And of course, Arizona has the Grand Canyon. Utah, the 5 national parks up there, plus Salt Lake City with skiing and stuff. And of course, to the east is Texas, and it's Texas. What do you expect that to be? But despite that, though, New Mexico is not to be overlooked. It has tons of really stuff. Here it is, guys. Santa Fe, the oldest state capital in the U.S. of A. Pretty cool. Here's downtown Santa Fe. All right, guys, we're going to climb to 13,500 feet. Here's downtown Santa Fe. We're climbing. We're going to climb to 13,500 feet, and we're going to fly over some of the beautiful mountain valleys of this U.S. state. Let's go talk about some historic fun facts about New Mexico. New Mexico has some cool information. Believe it or not, the surface area, lakes and rivers only make up 0.002% of the state's total surface area, the lowest land to water to land ratio of all 50 U.S. states. So yes, lakes and rivers are not actually big parts. It's pretty much as much inland as you can get. Of course, White Sands National Park is a desert made of not sand, but white gypsum crystals. I mentioned this earlier in the stream for you guys who paid attention. Yes, gypsum is what makes the sand of White Sands Park. Cimarron was once known as the cowboy capital of the world. So the Old West most famous names like Kit Carson and Buffalo Bill Cody lived in this city for quite a bit. You'd be surprised, but 1/4 of New Mexico is actually forested, and there are 7 national forests, including the nation's largest, the 3.3 million acre Gila National Forest, which includes the wilderness here. You can find that in the western half of New Mexico. Yes, that's the largest national forest in the state. And of course, one really cool thing about New Mexico is that in 1950, the little cub that was supposed to be Smokey the Bear was actually trapped in his home when in Lincoln National Forest was destroyed by a fire. In his honor, in 1963, the Mexican legislature chose the black bear to be the official state animal. But yes, Smokey the Bear, who you see all sorts of forest fire campaigns stuff and fire safety, he was a bear cub that originated from New Mexico. You're like, in the last, but at one point, um, was in was Hot Springs, New Mexico. However, due to a proper radio quiz program, the city actually officially changed its name to the name that's actually pretty famous, Truth or Consequences. Yes, yes, that's a real city, Truth and Consequences. You can find this right around the Rio Grande Valley. You can find Truth or Consequences. So, pretty neat stuff. And now for some of the famous people. They include actor Bruce Cabot from Carlsbad, Senator Dennis Chavez from Los Chavez, New Mexico, Robert Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park from Albuquerque. How about John Denver? You know, he's actually from Roswell. And fun fact about Roswell, for you guys that don't know, Roswell is one of the centers of UFOs. Got UFO stuff. Senator Pete Domenici from Albuquerque, one of the famous animators, William Hanna of Hanna-Barbera, from Melrose, actor Neil Patrick Harris from Albuquerque, very well-known voice actor, Conrad Hilton, yes, Paris Hilton's father, executive from San Antonio, New Mexico, baseball's Hall of Fame baseball player Ralph Kiner from Santa Rita, William Henry Bill Malden, political cartoonist from Mountain Park, the legendary head coach and broadcaster John Madden from Austin, actress Demi Moore from Roswell, New Mexico, and then the Unser family of race car drivers from Albuquerque, Al and Bobby Unser. So, yep, that's it for some of the famous people of New Mexico. More than you guys would actually think. And wow, look at the landscape here, guys. Yes, there's snow-capped peaks in New Mexico. Just gorgeous. Absolutely. Just gorgeous. We're just 44 nautical miles out from our final stop in Taos. Will be our final stop. Got some beautiful landscapes here. Like I said, this scenery is absolutely incredible. So our final stop is Taos, New Mexico. Those are going to be our last stop. Yeah, look at these peaks, man. This is crazy. You would never expect Mexico to have this, but we're going to go ahead and turn to 300. So our last stop is Taos. Or Tao, I think I believe. Taos. Taos. Taos is located in Taos County, New Mexico, in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Initially founded in 1615, it was immediately occupied until its former establishment in 1795 by Nuevo Governor Fernando Chacon, as a fortified plaza and trading outpost for the neighboring Native American Tao Pueblo, town's namesake, in the Hispanic communities, including the Ranchos de Tao, Taos, Canon, and more. It was then officially incorporated in 1934 with a population of 6,500 people. Its English name derives from the language meaning place of red willows. But one of the really cool things about this town, all the different historic sites, including various pueblos, most famously the Tao Pueblo. You also have various fiestas that are celebrated every weekend in July, as well as several artists' homes. More have been found in this area. And there's tons of really cool art museums, as well as tons of places for recreation, including the Carson National Forest, with areas like hiking, fly fishing, horseback riding, hot air balloon, llama trekking, and more. As well as numerous hot springs that people can enjoy throughout the area. So overall, really cool town, and it's got a lot of rich history too. In our final stop, and I think Taos Regional Airport is it. And I think that's our last slide of the day, guys. That's our final one for the day. Oh yeah, and Tao Pueblo is actually the most famous site in the city, in the town. It's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Yes, it's a World Heritage Site. I'm going to go ahead and descend down to our target altitude for this part. We're at 8,500 feet. Go ahead and descend. So here it is, guys. We'll fly over the town, and then we'll reach our final stop. But thank you guys so much for the support today. This has been absolutely insane. This has been the most I've had in a very long time. But man, this state has been absolutely gorgeous to me. Here we go, guys. Here's our Discord, by the way, if you guys still want to join on in. I'll keep this update for all you guys if you more of an interest in checking this out. So many amazing people. Absolutely. The Tahoe Regional Airport is a GA airport for the city, for the town. Of course, to our right, if you look to our right, that is Wheeler Peak, the tallest point in New Mexico, over 13,000 feet. Here, guys. This is our last stop. What a great. Hey, Cal and Can, good to see you. You know what? Why not? I'll do a flip. We're about to reach the end of the stream, so I'm gonna do a flip. Here we go. I got it. Close enough. Hey. Yeah, good enough. This one is if you wanted to do an aerobatic plane, I mean, you have the extra and all that. They're made for doing the flips. Not a Diamond DA62. At least I gave it a try, my dude. Thank you for the follow. Thank you. Hey, I mean, we're in the end of the stream anyway, so not big. Here we go, guys. We're gonna go ahead and put our flaps, and we're going to land. But good to see you. Thank you so much, guys. We're gonna land here in Tahoe, and then we're gonna park and turn off the engines, and we're going to wrap this thing. So. Here we go. What a beautiful day today. Here we go, guys. That's it, everyone. Guys, that wraps everything up. Thank you all so much for coming here, and we made our way to Taos, New Mexico. So, guys, a massive thank you for everyone here today. Really do appreciate all the people who showed up. We'll be back on Friday. We'll cover the 48th state in the Union, the beautiful state of Arizona. From Tucson over the page, we'll be flying over many of the iconic parts of Arizona. So we'll go ahead and say hello to our good friend Boozy Sheep. He's currently doing some gliding stuff. So we'll go ahead and say hello to Boozy Sheep. Stick around for the raid, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you to Joe Murphy and Sid Squadron for the big raids. What a day, guys. And thank you for all the people who stuck around as well. Massive thank you. So I hope to see you all again soon. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your weekend. Goodbye, everyone. See you soon.